Well, we've all been talking about this threaded bottom bracket, and it's not a threaded bottom bracket like a BSA. It's a threaded bottom bracket where a Canadian company has actually manufactured the thread into the frame. So basically what you're going to be doing is unscrewing the bearing housing straight into the carbon insert, and the thread has been designed to fit into the carbon. Now, we're talking about a composite material here, and I think before we actually start to think about making threads in carbon frames, we need to probably talk about composites and how composites work. So let's roll our intro and let's get into how do these composites work and why I don't think that putting a thread into carbon is probably the brightest idea. Now, when we talk about a composite means that there's a number of products that make up that complete item. So it's made of different products. And with carbon fiber, what it is it's a resin, and the resin has very little strength. It can be broken and it can be smashed. It doesn't have very much strength. So what you do is you lay some sort of fibers, and this is the same when you build boats. You can put fiberglass in, or you can put carbon fibers in. And what the carbon fiber does, it adds strength to the resin, and basically what it does is it gives it the ability to have a tension force applied to it that's much higher than just the resin itself. So what actually happens is when you lay the fibers into the device and you try and pull it, these fibers resist stretching, whether it be glass or carbon, and you can lay these up in the directions that you want that force to apply, so then the item can handle those loads. So that's why the layup of the carbon is particular, because the fibers will only work in the alignment of the fibers. So you need to cross fiber. So then if it pulls this way or even this way, you might have fibers standing this way as well, cross fibers, then it gives it strength. But because it's being so thin, they normally do it in two directions. And so you can design whether one way is going to have less tensile strength and other directions will have more or less, how you want to make that layup. So as we know with bikes, we can change the loading factors on different parts of the bikes to make it so it can take vibrations more. And in other places, we don't want it to take vibration, we want it to be very strong. So the layup's designed specifically. Now, let's move back to a carbon cut thread that is put into the bottom bracket. Now, before we get onto it, I just want to talk about items in the past have been used that are quite soft, that haven't got much strength. And they used to do this in wood, because all we had back in the old days is wood. And we used to actually cut thread into wood, and we would have a screw that would screw into wood. Now, we know that if we make wood very small, it's very weak. And if you had a screw thread and you screwed it, it'd just break the wood. So what they do is they make the thread very, very coarse. So the threads are very wide. And as you turn it in, it's got a lot more thickness. There's a lot more body of the wood there to be able to take that force. So when you get that pulling force, where the thread starts to tighten up and it starts to basically want to pull on that, the threads pull on each other like this, then you've got a much more thicker piece of wood to be able to take that loading. Now, when we look at this carbon bottom bracket, what they've done is they've used a fine thread, or a fairly fine thread. They haven't made it thicker. Now, the carbon, there's two factors here which I can't see really working. And the first factor is that if you don't get the carbon fibers into those ridges of threads, so you've got that loading, which is, it's going to be pulling it this way. So you need to have those fibers going across the thread, which is very, very difficult, not along the thread, because it hasn't got any strength on that pulling force. Then if you have no fibers in them, it's just resin and it's not going to be able to take very much force. So the torque loading when you screw it in has to be very low. Otherwise, you're going to just shear those threads off the main part of the carbon fiber. And the second is that the walls of the carbon fiber are quite slim. So you can't have coarse threads and make those pieces of resin thicker to take the loading. So first of all, you can't make it like the good old days where they had the wood, where we know that the material wasn't that strong and you can make it thicker because they haven't got the distance to make the threads much coarser. And two, to get the carbon fibers into those thread ridges is going to be very difficult. And let's just say you could do that. Then we're back to the good old problem, which we have in bicycles, is the quality control needs to be very accurate to be able to make those threads and make sure those fibers are within those ridges of the threads to make it very strong. Now, we can't even make a round hole or two holes that are lined up in bikes currently with a press fit. So why are we going to a system that inherently probably even has to have a higher degree of manufacturing to make it all work? Well, we'll see if this is going to take off. Threads cut straight into the carbon, or basically they've used a mandrel and made the resin into it. But even then, I don't know how they're going to get the carbon fibers to seat in all of those threads. Maybe they've got a patent, and that's what the secret is to the system. But I still have my doubts the way that they're going to be able to run the fibers in those ridges. They're going to have to run along the force so that they can take the loading. Well, anyway, guys, let me know what you think about this new carbon fiber thread cut into the actual bike itself. And do you really think it's a great idea? I think it's just another idea the bike's coming out with, because it just seems like in the last few years, they just seem to just want to come out with something different that sells. And we've seen that with these new breaking the double triangles in bikes. And we've got the Trek Madone, and we've also got this new, well, I can't remember the name of it, Sirius. That's it's basically a commuter, and they've got this radical frame. It's just not necessary. There's so many other ways that you can create suspension or comfort in a bike. Well, anyway, that's where I'm going to leave it, guys, and I will see you next vid.